Okay, so we're going to start into a hip shuffle. So you'll have two blankets behind your horizontal bolster. One of the blankets has a little bit of height, so you can roll it up into a little stacked up blanket set behind. You can always make them higher when we get to that part. But you'll sit center on bolster, and then I want you to take your sandbag, and you're going to take a simple cross-legged position. If you have a ball, put it under the right thigh. So the cross-legged pattern can be wide. It could be a little bit forward with your feet. I just don't want you to try to box it and make it too tiny. Okay, so feel like there's some ability to use this band of bent legs to help center your hips. So we take a sandbag and we put it up on top of that left, very top thigh. So it feels kind of like it's part of a belt. So you want to really do a little hip hugging, hip shuffle. Here we come. So centering the blocks in front, we have them up pretty high. Let's find where the hands can settle towards the knees, and then get a feel for the center piece of the spine, where you can navigate your awareness to sitting, and then energize that you reach the weight down into your sitting bones, which might make you kind of move into the tailbone centering down, but just simply feel where the practice begins and where the shoulders motion down and the inhale motions a little bit upwards as far as a sensation. And the exhalation relaxes you. Okay, begin this adventure with the movement of your head, because that part of the body does have weight. So I want you to let your body propel forward and then get a hold of those blocks. And of course, it means you have to kind of swing from your back into your arm, right? To get that lift into the body to lean forward. And of course, all of this can be very analyzed, but simplicity, we're going into a forward bend. And I want you to get a feel of your elbows, kind of like how, I mean, your knees aren't called knee bows, okay, but there's a feeling here that they're both sets of bending bones, right? Bending centers. So if you have an arm, the center is the elbow. We seem to think our center of our leg is our knee. So when we are folding forward, feel how the elbows motion a little bit downwards and the knees are motioning outwards. And then I want you to feel where the back can shift forward. So you're leaning at the hip hinge. And then start to move your blocks to the right. And when you move them over to the right, it depends on your comfort level if you go to 1 o'clock on the right side or 2 o'clock, but blend the motion of the spine so it lowers down to that right leg. I mean, that's an advanced concept that you get your spine on your right leg, but you know, maybe have some high hopes visualizing that motion. If this is too much concentration in your hip joint, you can always come back to this position when the blocks are forward, which is fine. But adjust so that the circulation is starting to roam in your hips, your back, and most likely a little bit more to the waist as we go. Okay, now when you get a feel here, I want you to just keep the blocks there to that side, whether they're at 1 or 2 o'clock, and then reach the left arm downwards and to your back, to the left side of the back. And then as you push off the block with the right hand, you're going to turn to the left and bring your right hand to that left leg, to the knee. It's kind of a simple connecting point, or you might be a little higher on the leg. But feel where the connecting point of the hand can relate to your correspondence of twisting with the insides. So that left hand could come back to the blanket. This feels pretty handy to my organizing motion, but feel movement possibility here. Okay, now we know that when we're doing things like cat-cow, we kind of squeeze parts of our body, we alternate pulses. Now feel if you can be here with that same principle of alternating a little bit, shifting forward, keeping the hand on that left leg, and then feeling that you can try to rotate to the left and not pulling your neck further, but feeling your ribs. So you can sense that the rib space has a little bit of a lift, and the left shoulder can have direction, motioning back. And now as you come back forwards, take a block to the right side, out besides your mat on the right, besides your bolster, far away, far out, and as far as it'll go, and stretch the left arm up and over. If this feels limiting to your shoulder and there's a little bit of a kind of a bracing tension, then have that left arm behind your back and let your head tilt to the right. But the arm lifting with it does help the neck muscles go in accordance with the spine. I find the arm is interesting balance here. So just give it a few moments. This is an interesting cycle of movements we're doing for the first 5 minutes. Just that's about all we'll do with the hip shuffle. Just see what occurs. You can turn your waist a little towards the right, kind of play with the turnstile of the rib cage here. So a little bit of that opening. Your head could fall towards that right arm. Make sure to pick it back up though. And then next time you come back towards the center, lift up out of that left arm, and we'll take the sand off. And I want you to put it under your knees. Okay, let the legs both have a simple stretch, have a stretch legs. And getting that belt, if your belt is in a wide loop, so it's buckled up together, if it isn't buckled up quite yet, it'll be fine. We'll get around to that for when we really need that. But for now, this gets us set for some poses ahead. So I just take that belt, I soften through my back muscles when I bend my knees, right? So when I slide my feet in, my stomach engages, my back stretches. And then as I scoop up my feet with the belt, I want you to work your way towards finding that sandbag under the legs. I suppose you could probably push the sandbag sides together to proof it up. So it seems like you get a little easier time getting there, and that's okay. I just want it to be so that the knees don't slam down, but the back of the knees have a light curve. And then organize this interesting motion in the abdomen. So of course, this can be one where if you look at yourself, it's a difficult experience to find where you're lifting up high. Yet your middle can sometimes round or look a little bit off kilter. So pull with your arms, good. Get a feeling of that erect spine, so upright, as if there's a lift at the crown of your head. Okay, the shoulders don't have to push back, but I want you to feel that you're as upright as you can. Just feeling it, not necessarily looking at yourself over and over, that it looks like a certain thing that you feel. Okay, now pull with your arm bands. Imagine that your arms are like these TheraBands, right? Your elbows are bending and you're pulling yourself, imagining that you're pulling over on top of the legs. Now the belt can be slid up towards the ball of the foot. That's kind of a nice enhancing calf sensation. And so you can feel where the feet organize movement together. And then spend a few moments doing your own version of a forward bend. So this could mean you stay with the belt because it's interesting and it's sensational, right? You can feel a sensational experience through the legs. But you might also want to get rid of that belt control and then take a couple blocks besides the legs and feel the feet in their kind of prim and proper flex and lift up through the ribs, because it's this kind of belly body that kind of goes with the flow, right? It has this downward prolapse during the daily experience when our head is here. So when we go with the flow going into that forward mold, feel if you can work with that gentle swayed motion of the heart, as if this is a scooping pattern in your back muscles to the heart. It's a swoop. The last few breaths here. Not forever, but just this sensation. You can hold your belt, you can have your hands on blocks, you choose. But try to keep the spine extended versus flex. So we're not doing any rounding like this pattern. So we're reaching, even if your blocks are closer or your hands are closer with your belt. Rather here than here. Okay. Now come back to pull on your belt to bring the knees pointing up. If you don't use the belt right now, just use your hands on the back of the legs. And then we're going to move the belt away and change the cross. So we'll take the left knee bending, the right leg forward, crossing through, take the sand on the right thigh, and then we'll go right into this reach with the blocks in front. So take the right leg, as I mentioned, so it's in front, sand on the right leg, and as you go into that forward fold, you might have a different habit with your bottom leg, one side that might scoop in closer to the bolster naturally. So kind of get a little insight into your kind of your hip hookup, right? How your hips kind of hook up with their balance. This is, I'm just giving this as an offering in the beginning of the class so that we can kind of assemble out our hip dynamics today. It might seem like an exercise pattern we're doing specifically, and it is. So lean forward or to the left, you choose. If you want to go a little towards 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock on the left-hand side, go for it. Okay, and get a feel for how the waist leans to the left. Okay, the feet are relaxed. They don't have to be forcing a flex. And the spine trying to extend might be a little bit of a challenge here. So if you have a mild case of flexion, okay, realistic, but if you can work towards just a subtleness of arching, just make it so it's, you can kind of process it. If it's too much on the hip, feel the flexion in the back. So that would mean you let the back do a little rounding. Breathing. Okay, right hand reaches around to the right side of your back towards your spine. And as you come around to the right side, left hand to right knee, feel when you get a hold, the right hand reaching back maybe on the blankets. And you certainly might notice if your response in your body to kind of turn and mobilize, you know, like I mentioned before, when you do cat-cow motions, you arch and you round, and that's, we've done it enough that we could do that kind of from any place. But when you try this kind of turnstile work, kind of juicing this, it's different. It's kind of tough and stuff, right? So it's tough stuff. So rotate to your interest or don't, right? You could just do the simple, I twist, that's it, right? I twist. And if the shoulder behind you is kind of pushing up, see if you can lower down so the shoulder isn't lifting and tugging. And left hand to that right leg, continue to keep that connection. Okay, try to stay with the energy here. The instruction will be real simple. So what you'll do is you'll bring that right hand to the right side of the waist. Left hand gets a hold to that block. You kind of have to go on a blind reach. And then reach out with that left hand on the block and lean over to the left and let the right arm stretch up and over. Might look a little different on the second side, how we approach it. But when you lean down to that left side and you let the waist turn and let the arm feel like there is some reach through the waist into the, the snaggy spot can be, right, the attachments, right? Usually that's where it gets a little bit rough. So if it gets rough there, then you bring the arm behind your back and you work with the waist. Okay, last few moments in the seated shapes. Okay, now when you slide that block back in and come up, let's take our sand away and get that belt. And we'll hold on to it. So I want you to uncross through the legs. The belt's going to have two purposes coming up. So we'll get our blocks from one side to the other side. Mid-height would be great. And then take your belt, so it's kind of doubled up. You have a loop, it's buckled up, and then you have it doubled, okay? And first thing, you could just let it rest on the top thigh area. It might slide to your waist, but just let it rest there. And then when you hold on to your knees, you're off of the bolster sitting in front. Feel the response. Sometimes a little challenging in the back to even be agreeable to the moment. Feel what upper back muscles are present for you to sit upright. Or maybe it's sitting uptight. Okay, and then let the back try to move forward to the heart. Take your belt and then round your back. You've got to round your back to find this. So I have to round my back so there's the flexion through the spine. You can kind of feel how your spine reaches apart. And then I hold on to the feet. Now the bottoms of the feet with my belt. Okay, so I scoop up my feet with my belt and then I pull back. So then the knees have to go to more of that bending cannonball shape. And you can maintain this. You can lift up your feet. So you have to bring the knees a little closer, not necessarily all the way together, but a little bit closer. And I would prefer to be here and work on lifting my chest and strengthening through my arms, then, try to go with full leg reach. You might decide that this is enough for you right now to stay here, and you can tilt your head ear to shoulder and not cause as much neck pressure. Okay, this is a kind of a little bit of an improv moment. You decide, knees bending, or maybe you want to go to the full range with the feet lifting and the legs straight. Okay, so you can go between the two of them as well. Use the bolster mildly. Make sure it's behind you. It supports you a little bit. And when you feel that lift of the legs, their length, also work with the shoulders, really capitalizing on strength using the arms. But they're in front of you, right? They're not pulling down, they're in front of you, the arms. Okay. All right, now bending through the legs. If they're not bent already, come back to bend. You'll feel the hands, the fingers, lower down so you can get out of that issue. Fingers reach, open out through the hands, through the fingers, spreading the fingers apart. And then get a feel when you lean back to use the bolster. Okay. Come forward, try to come up without using your hands around the legs to start. And then lower the hands down, fingers spread open, take a mini moment just spreading out your fingers and pressing, not trying to straighten the arms, but just pressing down with bent arms. Okay, and then slide your feet in, bring the knees out, and add your belt to the game here. So we'll get the whole loop over us. I like to be kind of picky here by having where the tail is on the belt, where let's see if I get it right, on dominant hand side, so I can tighten it up during the process. But the loop is pretty big, right? For most of us, we're not going to need that much loop for Supta Baddha Konasana. So I want you to find the pathway of getting your belt over you, the loop, and then tuck the belt back and get a block set under the legs. Okay, so mine are at the mid-height, their second setting. And my belt, it definitely gives a sense of pulling when I'm sitting, okay? So now you know the drill. When you motion back, the reason I have the blanket on top higher is so that you'll find that this might not even be as high as you want it when you get there. But you can always move it a little bit higher up, roll it up the next notch if you're not comfortable in your neck. So if your neck seems to jam up, you need a higher blanket, or like I talked about when I first came on, was getting a towel. But I thought, well, you can roll your blanket more if it's cozy. So I want you to play with getting your neck spot supported. The leg piece will be the easier part. You know, most of us, it's going to be shoulders, neck to work with to get centered. Okay, now the arms are open. I'm using the bolster specifically today to open up the chest in this position. Right, we usually have it lengthwise under the spine, and from spine wise to rib wise, we can span out the shoulder chest fabric, right? Think of this as the shoulder chest fabric, and kind of let the ribs quickly peel open. And you can add a sandbag across the rib intersection, or you could go sand free. You choose. But let your body get centered prior to just getting so committed to closing eyes and feeling like this is the right design for you, because it might not be. You might need your blocks to be a little different. You might need to shift your hips farther down. It's likely going to feel like there's segments of the body that are really getting separated and pulled apart on this pose. So it's not your typical Supta Baddha Konasana. It's a little different. And I would encourage you to try to get that kind of spread, long feeling, not necessarily just out, but the feet are far down and this whole length in the center. Okay. Yeah, I like to have my blanket, I feel a little bit higher right now. So I'm just gonna take it up one notch and just be okay with that. So it feels like a good neck balance. Okay, now as the arms are open, there's no other props to add unless you want that sand right here. Use the sand bag as a weight training for your breathing muscles. Optional. Completely optional. And as the inside moves with the breath, notice what you physically have as filter, breathing through the nose, relaxing out of the mouth. And finally feeling the abdomen, the belly body soften. Now scanning to feel a completion of your effort in this pose, scanning to feel balance and organization of the feet together. That might be the easiest balance for you right now because of the belt. but acknowledging the knees motion out, the pelvis, center of gravity, and that pelvic kind of basin. And now fine tune that the ribs actually do expand when you breathe in. And they center back in on the exhale. And some of these ideas might be a little confusing because when you inhale, there's the idea, well, it's not an idea, it's a reality, the diaphragm moves downwards. And then naturally when the belly expands, it's giving you a message that the diaphragm's working, right, properly, because that's the motion you're trying to figure out. But sometimes our daily habits or just our experiences with our nervous system might change that dynamic with stress. So even if this practice is just getting the shapes, kind of de-stressing by working with a proper posture, could be releasing stress just on its own, right? Just on the pose shapes and following that. But when I think sometimes when I inhale, there's sometimes this nature of the ribs feeling like they pull in. You have to kind of feature that whole area. So if the sandbag creates that pull, like inwards, and you probably would want to just not use that sometimes. And some days you challenge getting that movement to occur organically. Okay, with a few more moments, we're setting this up for side sage. So we have this rib area a little bit lifted already. We have the center pelvis, we got the inner thighs stretching. Okay. So moving any sand away and then finding where your buckle is. Or if you can't find it, then you might just kind of slide around to get the slack on the belt to loosen it up. And then you can kind of move your legs through it. In some ways you can kind of shift around so it's not holding you. And then as you point your knees up and you slide the blocks a little bit off to the side, can you take one of your blocks? Actually, you might not need it overhead, but let's go bring it overhead in case we like it there. And interlace your fingers, knees point up, feet down, of course, and then reach your arms back and feel this natural back bend here. Pretty restorative back bend. Even if it seems simple, use the props to support the angle. Now, if the arms are okay with this, we'll come back center and release. And then feel if you can kind of roll your way to the left to get to side sage with the left hip down. And I would recommend even just let your eyes kind of be more of a soft gaze or closed. And feel your hips move to the right. And then you swivel around so that left hip rolls down. And then you find your way to come to get on your left side and getting yourself ready for side sage. So the ball might come in, you might have to get up a little bit, kind of sit up to your hip. Not always a perfect pose transition. And the block overhead could be helpful. You don't really know till you get there. Now the blanket set right now for me is too much. The blanket right against the bolster, I'm gonna have to push that back. So I have a little sliver of space for my arm. Okay, some of you might like that, but might like the blanket, I suppose. Now it's about the shape, right? Not about the necessity of us having this exact same prop measurements, because we're all different shapes. So the whole thing with the props is that you adjust them for you. If your left hip is feeling too much pressure, then you might add a blanket under the hip. Okay, and some days it feels more pressurized than others, but the sand on the side is good. Okay, sand is good. So feel where the reach is with the side with that left knee pulled up towards the bolster. Start to reach with that right rib cage. And I know the arm seems to be what you associate with reaching, but if you're moving from your center, you just go slow. I'm going like maybe a little bit too slow for understanding, but you might approach things this way to just see what happens. If you tend to slack and then the arm drops over, it's sewn together pretty well. It's probably not going to drop off, but you might move it a different way than this. You might open it up. You might let it relax on top of the sand. Okay, but explore the side seam. Yeah, you might even get fast movement, draw, and feel what that response is if you get your block. You point it to a different height, and then relaxing your face, the neck, the head weight into the blanket. Set it up for comfort. Wait. Slow in breath. Feel the ribs move with your breathing. Even though the diaphragm still has its primary pattern, the breathing experience seems to be a little bit more in the intercostals now, right? The secondary respiratory muscles, so the muscles between the ribs. Now, the little bit of a trick on this one I find is that you want to feel your opposing reaches, right? One is with the leg, and even though you don't maybe compute it's the leg, but it is the attachment to the hip that's the lowest piece. And then with the arm, but you don't have to struggle and have the arm in a position too long. If it starts to cause any riff in the neck or just doesn't feel comfortable in any piece of the shoulder placements, you can lower it back down. But I still want you to get a feel of the ribs motioning, whether you've lowered the arm or you've taken it open or taken it over, across and down. Those are another way you can go. And then feel that right leg as it has moved itself back. A few more slow breaths. Okay, we take our body through all these different pathways, right? That's part of the practice for me, is pathways to go towards our centering. So let the sand slough off. Sometimes you get lucky and it'll fall. And then roll to the left. So you're turning to the left. So you're turning in towards all fours. So when you associate now with your knees under and your hands, maybe they're a little bit forwards. But get a blanket if you need under your knees. We won't be bearing down on weight for a long time on the knees, but if you don't like having your knees like this without some surface height, you can always add a blanket at any time. But the hands stretch open through the fingers, and the combination now of rounding your back into cat. However you're looking towards the screen, you don't necessarily have to see it. Remember, you can listen to, and arch through the spine. And then as you motion your back muscles, also feel the tendency to maybe look or use your neck by your eye movement. So feel the weight of your head down. And then arch again. Inhale. Gently lift up the face towards the space away from you. And then round your back to cat. Toes under. Lift up the knees. Okay. alternate bending your knees so that you're pedaling through the feet a little bit, but you're feeling the ball and then feeling a reach down to the heel. Now that the blood flow has gone to the face, and you probably feel a pretty fast sensation change in the skin cells of the face. Take the feet into a very wide stance behind you. So you're in this kind of wide stance dog pose and head downwards. Now the bolster might not touch your arms. You might be forward the bolster. I really like to use the bolster if I can get a touch to it. So it reinforces balance on the arms, meaning I use each of them equally. And you would think they would do that, but they probably have their own agenda. Okay. But now you're going to creep your feet a little forward and then creep your hands a little back up onto the bolster and have this wide stance with the feet still so they're parallel as could be. Just use the sides of your mat as a measuring. And the hips are sensing stability here. This is a lot of hip root work. Now, if you need the blocks on top of your bolster to do this, you might end up having your blocks on top as well. Some people might find that the block is floating on the other side though, but if you can monitor on the bolster, try that. And then pull the thighs up so you're sucking up the quadriceps so they lift up. The muscles at the front of the thigh are trying to grip now, trying to lift up. Okay, and then let's take a moment where we lean down. Okay, those quadriceps relax. They relax. Head swings through a little bit. And you can either relax your front paws on your bolster and let your head release. You can also hold the legs like so, or you can bring your hands to your elbows and gently hold on and let the spine drain out. So you will find which of those positions is helpful for your body to have a little less resistance to the circulation benefit from being upside down. Well known, right? Beneficial for the vascular system, the immune system, basically circulatory system. So as your head lowers, if there's a little inner grip to pull your neck a little forward, meaning your chin forward, I guess it's your neck back, then bend your knees a little more if that's the case. And so you feel a little more support. You certainly can let your arms just relax on the bolster too. That's easier sensation for you. Few more breaths here, forward bend. It's a wide angle for us because we have our feet wide on the mat for most, I think. Okay, now, the hips might not have any ability to emphasize a lot of movement here. They're pretty stuck, right? So they're at their wit's end. So when you start to move forward back to your hands, maybe you need to bring your feet a little closer. Maybe you have to kind of play a dance of flexibility to get there. But once you coordinate moving your feet back and your knees back down, take the right leg, lift it up behind you, and the left arm forward and up. Okay? Yeah, just simply go with it. Try it. If you lose the balance, then you just try the second side. Lower the left hand, right knee down, and then switch left leg back and lift it. Right arm reaching. Just go with simplicity. Back leg up, right arm forwards. The pointer pose. Okay. Now, as you lower down the right hand, you're going to shift your weight back, and you're going to turn to your right hip next to your bolster, and left leg is reaching behind your hip, right? So side sage. Get a ball under the left leg, and then feel where the waist leans into that bolster, and the arm slides through between, and now we start to get ourselves ready for the second side sage. It's an event. This is an event today for me. Okay, so when you put the sand on that side, you know, noticing that maybe you don't have to force this opposing reach with the arm and leg as much as it's written about on this pose path. But it's the ribs that you're focusing on that opposing reach. And they feel like this collective, right? It's like, even though I know you don't think you're one rib, it feels like this collective rib. Like it's a body of movement with the breath. It's like one, you know, organ that moves or pulses, I guess. So you want to think of it as really spreading. And the spine has 3 sections, but our ribs, now there's 12 sets. There's a lot of them, just like the vertebrae, right? Lots of vertebrae too. So the numbers are somewhat similar there, right? So when you have a reach, well, spine a little more, but when you have a reach, that left arm is going overhead. The waist is lengthening. Yeah, and if your breath seems to make that sand maybe possibly feel like it's falling, then change the sandbag so it's an easy placement so you won't lose it. Maybe one side you have to change it up a bit, okay? Use the body weight into the ground to be easeful with the breath. Doesn't have to be challenging. You don't have to make things more effortful, but using the props to support your bones. Okay? Good. Come into the pose when you're ready. Feel the breath through the sides. You know, with that stillness, maybe it becomes quieter for you or simpler internally. I want to feel that we internalize the practice as well. So we start probably by now to feel the inner responses. Maybe you slow down, even a tad is enough, just slowing down a little bit. And sensing your breath. Okay. So now that we have this whole side kind of slinky, you get these sides, and if you think of that like the ribs, right, that separating, and we kind of let them widen, even though it's not beyond body form widening, it's realistic for whatever that means. But now we're going to flip to inversion, and so this middle pack is going to feel like a pack that you want to use as the legs drain out, right? So sometimes this Viparita Karani is called waterfall, right? So this pack in the middle, these organs, right, are going to be, you know, absorbing that benefit and draining out, right? So as you roll to your right hip, roll in the waist to the bolster and down. And you do have to come kind of down into your hands to get yourself back up to air, okay? And then get your block. If there's one behind you, move it. I didn't use the block much on that experience today. Usually I would, but didn't today. So use the setup so that you're moving your blanket so there's one behind you and it's at a flat, you know, quarter fold. And then, you know, sit for a mini moment just to get your bearings around with your props. That they're all to your sides or back, but not down to the feet. Okay, belt is important. Now, when you do a little bolster bounce, okay, lower down And get yourself all figured out, clothes and all. Okay. So we've got our spine lifted now, right? It was on its side. It has not been in this position yet today. Well, I can tell us you did this before class. But you've got your hips lifting. And so I want you to let the weight of the hips, the back of the pelvis is probably the best cue. And the tailbone, when the knees are bending, you might not really associate with exactly the tailbone, but you know that there's a tail area there, okay? So first bring your feet straight up without a sandbag, because that's predictable, I know. But use your pressure ability that your tailbone kind of lands here in towards the bolster, okay? Then get a sandbag pretty quickly. So you want to add this so you can feel the tail area. And it's not going to stay on your ribs. I just have it here to get it kind of measured out from each side of the sack. And it's like a big lobe. And now the tailbone, what we're going to work on is when we have the sand on the feet, you can feel the tailbone lengthen out a little better. Okay, so, I mean, I tend to think of it very vertebrally, you know, and so skeletally. But when you bend your knees and then you try to get that sand to the feet, or if you have a bag of rice or whatever you might have, that's at least 5 pounds. 10 would be great. Suppose you could aim for more, but here we are with the sand that we have. And now when I have the feet positioned up with the sand, you might feel each side of the spine's different. You might feel the tailbone in the center. Might be a little bit more outlined with sand. Those areas are a little more lined up. The sand gives us a nice strength, you know, density to the position. Okay, if you add sand, so be it, if you're able to do that. Usually you have to bend your knees like so, and then you have to kind of put the 2 sandbags here and then put them over. That's one way to do it. Or go with one. One and done for this. Okay, so we've got our tail space centering down, almost like you're creating more of this arch in the waist. You're exaggerating it. But feel how the feet are up and the head is relaxed on some blanket. Okay, and if you have a belt nearby, get that. And I want you to hold the belt so it's unbuckled probably just fine. But if you can, you know, kind of double layer that belt so it's a little more reinforced. I find this is better for me if I reinforce it. It's not a perfect situation, trying to get it together reinforced. And so together the belt is each side, double up. And as you move it overhead, you get a feel of your elbows widening. You might get lucky and find your blanket, and those things are almost right there for you, like it was meant to be for this position. And some of us, the elbows might be to the side of the blanket. Okay? So recognize when you're doing this mild grip, it's pretty loose. Okay, if you don't want to use your hands to pull at all, the opposite idea for this would be you could buckle up your belt, make a loop about this big, put it around your elbows and bring your arms overhead, and then you don't have to use your hands. You got to use your hands to get the belt, I think, that's for sure. Hands are required, I guess. Okay, so rest your eyes. And maybe the neck musculature as well. The chin relaxes down. Nothing exaggerated with the neck, just let the spine find its line. And then inhale, belly full. Let the belly body move. And exhale, belly relaxes towards the spine. Giving the legs time to reverse circulation away from the feet. So the feet might feel a little bit cooler, maybe tingly, right? So the blood flow is moving from the extremities to the vital organs. And that's part of the idea of restoring in this position, restoring for the organs, reversing the effects of gravity and the downward pull of gravity on it releases that gravitational pull on the organs. Okay, and you can release the grip on the belt anytime. It doesn't need to be something secure. Sometimes you can find ways of holding on to a belt like this, and you kind of forget you're holding it. You have a mild grip. It does help that balance in the shoulders. It doesn't have to be overdone, but you can just almost get the hands to manipulate around the belt on their own relaxation force. But at some point, relax your grip entirely on the belt. And then bend through the legs, but feel when you bend, that kind of hook in towards the front of the upper thigh, the thigh lid, the hook into the hip crease. Okay, now go slow. Now this is almost too slow, but feel slow as that crowds into your back. And then you're going to reach up to the sand and move that. But what I want you to do is, if it's okay for your ribs, just move it just to the belly body. And then get a block. If you can get a block. Reach to the block and at least have one to the right side of your bolster. So if you only can find one block, then just that's all you need is one, really. And my block is on that side and it's at the second setting. You could have it low too. This is the low setting. And then you'll bring your knees over to that block. So I'm going to slide it a little bit out because my legs have a little length from the hip to the knee. And then we add that sand to the very side of the left leg. Okay. So this is kind of a bit of a pinning position for the hip to kind of caress those muscles to creating circulation. Not necessarily length, but it's a hope, but we know it does increase circulation. And when you get a feel of that left arm opening and the hand relaxing, or the arm opening and sliding down a little bit, which seems for me a little bit, it's shoulder easeful for me, and the chest loosens, okay, through the bronchial tubes and the throat to this upper respiratory tree. And sometimes we don't really give it a focus at all, unless something's wrong with it. So this is a good time in restorative to highlight those areas that are working hard for you. The throat, the breathing muscles, the experience of sensory organs in the face. You might let your eyes relax to let your head roll to the left. If it doesn't go very far, it's okay. It might be a little bit gripped up. And my hope is you feel this on the left outer leg. You feel something here on the left outer band, the IT band, the piriformis maybe. You can keep on this idea of the left hip, okay? Well, you don't have to do more than that. You just keep on the idea of this left hip stretching, okay? Now, your belt's overhead, I think. It's probably back here somewhere. So get your belt. Tricks with props, okay? Prop tricks. All right, so When that knee is gliding or the leg gets guided to the right, the whole leg parts are guided to the right. You're kind of swerving over. And your waist is, ideally your left shoulder's down. I know this isn't true for all of us. That's very easy to do, easier said than done. Depends on this shoulder's hold up, could have some. Now, when we take away the sand, just plop it on down. Bring your left knee in towards your ribs, kind of pull it in a little bit, the left knee. And then get your belt under the foot, because that seems to be the attachment that works. And then lower the right leg straight down, or straight-ish. And then stretch the left leg back to the right. Hopefully you won't get too stuck next to a wall or some piece of your house that is in the way. But work your way so that you can still get that left. I'm not going to pretend I'm doing it, I'm going to do it. You're going to feel the side and the side band. With the knee was bending and the sand on it, might feel a little different here. Maybe more, maybe less of some art areas. But feel now this left arm trying to stay open. Like I mentioned, this is a hip shuffle. This class is, I would call it a hip shuffle. Okay, left shoulder is down, left leg is across. Now bending through the left knee, and the right knee may be on its side and bending quite a bit. Actually feel that lower right leg. Feel if you can bend it as much as possible, as if you kind of slide the foot up. Just notice if that's different in your upper hip, your left hip. Maybe the leg down feels easier than when the leg bends. Yeah, it's not a big change for me, but it's interesting. So when you bend that left knee and you help yourself to the back, I want you to truly be on that bolster, on the back, bolster back, and then bring the left leg up and hold the belt, but reach up with your hands and pull. Flex. We did this dynamic in the beginning, right? We had our belt around our feet. Maybe some of us use the belt, some use the blocks besides you, but feel the arms. And if the bend of the elbows just naturally happens, it's best to find, okay, some balance that works for you. Okay, kind of work around it, but feel a very strong sense in the bottom of the back of that left lower leg in the calf. I want you to feel more of the calf than necessarily in the hamstring, but you might get both anyway. And that right foot's going to slide in, so the knee is bending and the foot is at the bottom of the foot is down. Pull, really pull, pull, pull. You can feel the muscles through the left leg. Resistance, like the foot's pushing away from you. Push like it pumps up. Okay. Now, when you bend through that left leg and you take your belt to the second side, you're going to lift up that right leg and lift up. We're just going to do a little bit of we're going to go backwards on this side because we have the second side to go. And we'll need to use the sandbag as well on the hip. So we'll go a little backwards and see how it flows and the physiology. So when you pull, you need to provide the right dose of arm reach out of the back muscles. Okay, and then get a feel for that flexion. And that's easier said than truly doing. Because if you think of flexion like in your back muscles, in your hands and knees, the back is rounding, right? Cat pose. But here, the foot can only go so far. So once you've found that balance and acceptance, probably, you'll slide the left foot in so that left bottom foot is down, and the right bottom foot is also interacting, right? They're both interacting. Left foot is just feeling a floor, and the right foot is with this resistance game. Yep, that's what the class is actually should be called sometimes, a resistance game. That'd be a good name for the bonds class if we covered that, the resistance game. Because that's the idea of working with bone density, huh? Resistance with the yoga. Okay, so feel where the hands are pulling. Well, you can feel the pull on the leg, not necessarily the arms only. And then we'll take the crossover. So what you'll do is, it's like be as organic, just let natural movement happen, not necessarily sorting out it should be a certain way. When you take the belt together with the left hand holding and the right leg goes across, this left leg's got to go somewhere so you can actually get over with the right leg. So it will flow down, it might bend. And just like you did with side sage, you have habits that you do with the bottom leg that are individual, but the bottom leg is usually bent up, but the legs still kind of sort themselves out. So your mid body can benefit. So this rib body is expressive. You're opening it out to that right side and your head rolls to the right. Feel through the hip. Now this might be a nice way to get this dynamic across for your not just your superficial back line here, the back itself into the hip joint, but when we do bend the right knee, sorry, we're going to the left and our right knee bends, I want you to just slide the belt away and then get your knees over to that left side. I don't know if you can see this easily. Yep, to the left side. So I got my block here. And I'm going to tilt it up so it's at that second height. Okay. And then I'll add my sand. Now, let's say you try to move your legs a little downstream, right? Like this little exaggeration, but this kind of motion, so they're not kind of pulled up in a fetal position. You might sense this rib expansion. This is the interesting force for the circulatory system and also the change on the heart rate. You know, these are physiological support poses, right, for blood pressure and so forth. So even if that's not something that you need to spend energy along, it's good to notice that these can affect things. So feel when you regulate the rib cage open. It's also structural. Some of us might have an injury where the right shoulder doesn't come down exactly like the left shoulder here. So do what you need to. Maybe you need a blanket under your right shoulder. Right? You could slide that in, put that under the right arm. Okay, and that can be helpful for your balance, and that becomes the floor for you, the blanket. Now, well, part of it. So head turns right. Try the other side of the neck this way. It's important to feel both sides trying to release. And let your left arm relax. Everything is centering upon the focus of the hip. Yeah, hip circulation is in good supply here. Breathing. Now take a few of these moments to manage the motion of the breathing in that lower belly body, expanding, contracting. And then at some point you want that fluidity of the breath, that expanding and contracting, to not have a shutdown, right? You don't want to have that expanding, contracting stop. You want to have expanding, right? Abdomen expands, exhale. Diaphragm moves up towards the space below the heart. That's why the heart has a little expansion, and then it just keeps flowing through. And it'll have its own, autonomic. It's going to automatically go through that practice without you trying to force it. I know, but it's nice to be part of it, and then I think your brain physiology can be calmer maybe by that practice. Okay, now we're going to do a little windshield wiper motion so the side flesh of the leg can kind of continue its experience right now. So, and if you do get tingling and any of those kind of blood supply issues will come up, right, in your circulatory system, those things can happen upon themselves in the practice. That's a good sign. Let's shift on, right? If anything gets like that, is to keep moving along. So when you bring your knees, you move the sand off, and you bring your knees back center, you kind of let the knees go a little side to side and be slow because the back has to kind of reset, but you want to use the practice to help things loosen up their stuffness, right? Their restrictive qualities of banding up in the back. So this is a good one to use the bolster to kind of rub onto. You're rubbing on the bolster with your back. It's helping out to loosen up. It's not quite like a foam roller, it's softer. But you can use it similar. And then as your knees flow in, can you keep them pointing up? As far as you know it, they have a vertical stance. Maybe they're not quite perfect, but they're up. And then you're going to bring your hands to your bolster, okay? Then pull the knees into your chest. Push the bolster. It's kind of fast and flowing right then. And then the feet on top. And let the arms open out. And then push to the feet. They don't have to be perfectly like straight down onto the bolster, but it doesn't hurt to have the bolster close to you, I don't think. You also don't want it too close so the knees don't feel too much pressure. But when you open out the arms, you're trusting. You're going to push into your feet and lift up the hips to that bridge path and lower the spine down. Now take the time to really measure movement through the spine on both these directions. So inhale, arms overhead, reaching them back overhead, hips lifting. You can either remove your blanket under your head or keep it. And then exhale, lower the spine, hips, hands. And then again, your hips, right? Your hips take their full landing. Inhale, lift the hips up, and then extend the arms. If you're okay with it overhead, no requirement, but may be helpful. And then exhale, lower the spine. And ease the upper back mound down. So there might be an area. I'll sit up and point to the area I'm thinking of for you all. But keep going with bridge, okay? So I'm thinking of this area in the back, right? Where you're trying to get your bridge pose to go to. So it's really higher onto that back. And I want you to try to get to. So the blanket might interrupt that a little bit, but do work with this height of the bolster to get you to get higher. So that's why when we put our feet on the wall and do bridge pose, you can get so much higher, right? It allows you to climb up your spine. So if you decide you want to do some spine climbing, you can get your feet at a wall, no problem. You can just go for it. So let the spine lift and lower. Now, will the arms help you get higher on your back? It's not likely going to make it that much different, but they do have a reaching direction for you getting to your back versus if they're down by the sides of you trying to get your hips and your spine, that massage. Okay, now roll through just a couple more times. But this time you're going to bring your knees to your chest after you roll down. And then your feet to the bolster. Inhale, lift up, hips. So you have a dynamic of motion. Exhale, lower spine and knees to chest. So we'll go 2 more from here before we move on. So you feel the feet and then you lift the hips. Be sure that you have a blanket if it feels good for your neck, just use it. Right? No one's required to get rid of their blanket. And then once you feel that knee angle moving in, okay, you're gonna let your feet push the bolster to the right. And we've done this a little time, but we're back to trying this again. So we've got our bolster besides our mat on the right side. If you've got a ball, get it. And then right leg down, left leg over to the bolster. Now, we've already used our sand on the side of the leg, so you could add it again if you like. This will be a brief timing. So you might hold onto the leg with your right hand and then just kind of feel what it's like. And if you love sand on your leg and stretching your hip, then just add it right here. Don't worry about it. But this just changes it up a tiny bit. So you want to have that ball, if you've got it, really insert that at the sacrum area so it feels like it's kind of nudging you a little to the right, okay? And then try to lie back into the ball a little bit. So you're using your stomach muscles. This is a great psoas one. I love this ball situation. And when it's pointed to the inside and to the tail, and then this layer of flesh in the waist to the navel center has this kind of confusion going on. So try to keep the twist. Keep the left leg over to the bolster. If the bolster is too low, what do? You put a block on top of it? No problem. All right, just add a block and the bolster just grew. Okay. And that might work better for your whole balance internally. Kind of feels nice. I'm going to use it. So with a few moments here, feel this dynamic. If you want to go without the block, go for it. Try to keep this core dynamic here. It's like you've got like this band on the waist, and there's all these bands in here that seem like they don't always work or they're lazy. So this kind of keeps it in tone, okay? Now switcheroo, we're gonna take this 90-degree angle, so you're gonna take your ball, move it away, and then shift the knees to point up with the ball. If you've got a ball between the knees, if you don't have a ball, you just don't have one. So it's no big deal. You do the same thing without the ball. So my ball's between the knees. Then I let the feet flex, try to flex through, bring your hands down besides your, well, as far down as they'll go, arms are straightish, and then let the legs shift forward. Right? The idea is you don't want to lose your ball, okay? So you don't have to squeeze it, but you just want to keep it as a spacer. Inhale, legs straight up to 90 degrees. Exhale, the legs go forward. They might go to 60 degrees. No, don't force it to 40, just let it go a little bit and then back up. Now, I find that sometimes this ball, I want you to keep going about 4 more times. So we do about 6 to 8 of them. Okay? I find that exchange of holding on to something makes it a little easier. My hip flexors, the very top of my legs, with the ball makes it a little easier. It's kind of this distraction, okay? So this final spinal that we're doing, I want you to kind of keep that circulation engaged with or without the ball. Don't have it, it's just fine. You do use it. Okay, now bend through the knees and squeeze into the ball. Mush it. Try to squish it, smush it. Okay, now bring the knees to your chest. Remove the ball and then bring your feet down and move the bolster to the left. One more. Just one more thing. So left side is a bolster, and I stretch the left leg down, cross the right leg to that bolster, add the ball to the sacrum. And then if you don't have one of these exact ones and you have something else, like a little massage ball, you can use that. I think a tennis ball is just not going to be quite big enough, but I guess you could tape them together or something. I'm not sure what would count. Okay. A Nerf would be fine too. So hold on to that right leg and then roll your head to the right. The only thing that wouldn't work is if you blow up a balloon. At least everyone's muted, right? We won't be hearing that, but that would not be good for our nervous system, huh? We'd be shocked. Okay, so when you hold and you have that turn, do you need something more on your bolster? Is that enough height? Is the hand or the sandbag on the leg enough? And then feel how the spine is moved in all these angles today. It's probably been cranked around, the hip has been shuffled, so taking a few moments of integration will be good here. Now, if that lower leg is very bent, right, bent fully, see if you can kind of stretch it down when you come out, like you're getting up out of a nap. You have a little bit of reach out of your body to the extremities. Coming out of a cat nap, kind of reaching. And then when you hold onto that right leg, if you are indeed, or if you have a sandbag, slide it off. You're going to move the ball away and then bring your knees now both push into your feet so you can bring your knees into your chest and then roll up and take your bolster bench setup. So you're going to move your blocks to the center of your front of your mat, the foot of your mat, and then put your bolster on top. But the blocks can be at the low setting or the second setting up or the third setting. If you're pretty long-legged, the third setting usually works just fine, but if you're not, it does not seem to bode well. So when I move back, you want to be comfy. So if you have some extra blankets, right, you might go ahead and put that on, or swaddle the legs or anything that you have around that could be helpful. Right? You can swaddle up and you have your blanket on your bolster. So these legs can be a little bit warmer and comfier. And as you put the sand, whether it's on your shins or on your ribs, start to lower down your cycle of movement to a still point, because we do quite a flurry of movement in this sequences, I think, if you watch them. They're not entirely still. But we're moving into stillness here for a few moments. So let the sand find its support either across or it's from the heart down to the belly. Or if you don't really like the sand up at the breathing area, you can also put it down on the belly. And that is a breathing area, right? That is an area you bring focus to breath. But some of us might find that it's kind of soothing for the digestive area or one of its landmarks. And if you don't want it, just take it away. Let's let the eyes relax. If you have an eye pillow or something you want to put over your eyes so that you feel a little bit more comfortable in connection to slowing down, returning the body to a place of balance. Let the forehead soften. Noticing any weight that comes around in your facial physicality. If there's some pulling, cringing, tightening along the skin, see if you can let it go. And just smoothing out the in-breath through the out-breath. And swallowing to clear the passageway of the throat. Just letting the awareness enter into you kind of through your pores, and just acknowledging your efforts and practice, your dedication. And connection to the greater good. Now letting your head nod from side, and then keep it going all the way to the other side. Bring it back in the center, removing anything you might have that's layered on from your belly up to the brain. And then if you have sand on your shins, you'll gradually get that to shuffle off. And if you have the blanket, it'll be easy. Right? You just bring your knees to your chest and you kind of huddle in for the back to give that full stretch to the back muscles. And breathe around that wrap of muscles from your back, rolling to your side, and then come up to whatever is the most easily managed seated position for the moment. Just find some time to center collectively. I'm here, you're there. We're all sort of here in this state. And bring the hands so that they can blend together in front of the heart. And then as the palms push, feel that there's no push into the heart center, right? You can let that area gently feel the flexion of the back, and it rounds to protect the heart. So connecting to